Before we get started, those of you, well, first let me introduce us. I'm Dave Lamson, National Sales Manager for Network Consulting Services, and with me is Bryan Hadzik, who is a pre-sales and implementation specialist engineer who's going to run us through a lot of the products that you're going to be seeing today. But for those of you who have joined us for these webinars before, we like to have a little contest and talk about put a city behind us and see if anyone can identify us. So I'm going to get out of the way for a second. You want to take a look at it, maybe even take a screenshot of it.
Oh, that's cheating, Dave. Don't give him too many hints.
If anyone knows that city and can put it in the chat, we will first correct answer. Larry's got some kind of gift cooked up.
Some kind of prize.
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but we'll make sure to take care of you. So we're looking at that. In the meantime, we're here to talk about Ivanti and IT Service Management.
Yep.
We are a premier Ivanti partner. We're based in the Salt Lake City area, which is right near the Ivanti World Headquarters.
Yep.
And Ivanti has a broad portfolio and a lot of products, but I think the conversations we're having most often these days are around service and asset management, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Service management is something that always needs continual improvement. We're always trying to get better at it. A lot of other technologies, we kind of just, we implement it, we turn it on, and we kind of walk away. But service management is always that progression. What am I doing next to get better? What am I doing next to, evolve for the business? And so it's always an interesting topic of conversation. And there's a lot of turmoil and change in the industry of people expanding and shrinking, and where do I fit in that ecosystem is kind of a constant question our customers have.
And we're not here to bash any other products. In fact, we are familiar and resell and support a couple of other solutions in this space.
Yeah.
But most of what we do is Ivanti, and there's some reasons for that, and it's kind of how we came up with that Goldilocks theme.
Yeah.
That whether you're at the start of your journey looking for IT service management and just trying to get into maybe incident, problem, and change, or whether you're more mature and maybe you've got the Rolls-Royce solution and maybe tired of paying a lot of money for your renewal and looking for something that can do most of the same plus a broader platform, we've got the right solution. And Gartner agrees with us, right?
Yeah, we kind of had some fun with that with the topic of this webinar, the Goldilocks. What is the right fit for me? So we sit down with a lot of customers and try and understand where their maturity is on this. It's not a discipline like a lot of other technologies. Hey, I need a firewall. Well, how big do you want it? Do you want a big one or a small one? They work the same way. This is not that case. It really depends on what our business drivers are and what our level of maturity is. I've met organizations that are 10,000 users, yet they have an ITSM maturity that I've met other customers that are 1,000 users in size. So that it can be an extreme scale of what my level of maturity is, and then the majority of the time we have the ability of wanting to increase that maturity, right? We want to drive that up, and so everyone looks at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And that is interesting, right? It's this little image that says where we're at in the leaders quadrant, and Ivanti is in the leaders quadrant.
We're there.
But I want people to look a little bit deeper, look a little bit more than just that surface level. There's a section, I don't have an image for it right now, but we'll show it a little bit later. The critical capabilities. So this is the where does your product fit in if I'm low maturity, medium maturity, or high maturity? It's the Goldilocks, right? What bed is the right fit for me? And Ivanti's pretty unique here, where we can be in the top 3 on both low, medium, and high-level maturity. So the idea behind that is it can grow with me. I can start at a lower level, and I can grow and start unlocking more capabilities. Whereas maybe some other products, they're either going to buy too high, where I'm buying this big giant elephant, and I just I can't consume it. It's too hard to get off the ground. Or the opposite direction. Hey, I'm going to buy something easy and cheap. But then it doesn't have those enterprise level functionalities that I need, and so we're going to be kind of running out of runway there. So it's relatively unique that we can be on there, and hopefully we're going to show off a little bit of that today.
Yeah, and we're not going to go into the licensing in details today. That's not what we're here for. But just know that there are some very attractive licensing bundles and price points that meet where you are on that maturity scale. You can get into it for a relatively small amount for the licenses. And there are paths to grow, just like you were saying. This is going to be there for you in the long term. NCSI is going to be there to support you in the long term.
Yep.
And we can help you down that journey.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive into it a little bit. As I'm going through this, please keep it interactive. Just use that Q&A for any questions that you have. We can try and answer as we go along. And also, I'm just trying to give a little bit of a flavor of how it works, not to get into every last little detail and so forth. Just a quick high-level overview of how our platform works and how we can even extend it into other technologies. ITSM is sometimes looked at in a little bit of a vacuum, but there's more to it than that, right? There's things like asset management that is a neighbor of ITSM. It's not technically in like the ITIL discipline, but it's a very close neighbor to it, as well as our ability to actually fix our computers, our digital experience components that actually reach out to our machines and try and solve our problems, remote control them, patch them, push out software to them, etc. We'll kind of touch on that.
Yeah, and before you get started, I'm just going to warn everybody. Bryan talks quickly, and he can talk on this topic for a long time. Our normal demos for service and asset management, 90 minutes to 120 minutes.
Yep.
If you're looking for that level of detail, we're going to provide some information at the end of this on where people can see longer recordings, or we'll be happy to do demos for you individually. So what you're going to see today is going to move quickly, and it's going to be surface level, just to give you an idea. And we have customers of all sizes and maturities who have joined here, so we hope to have something for everybody. And any questions, again, put them in the Q&A. We'll address them during this, or we'll address them afterwards if it's better for a one-on-one.
Okay, let's get started. So let's jump over here to the whiteboard. I'd like to have a conversation more about some of the important tenets of ITSM, ITIL, ITAM, kind of work through that first before we get into how are we actually going to solve this problem. So the platform we're going to talk about today is Neurons for ITSM, and it is ITIL based. And you know what? That's an interesting thing to say. ITIL is a great standard, but we consider ourselves a little bit of ITIL pragmatists, meaning we want to adopt the parts of ITIL that make sense, but maybe other parts don't necessarily make sense, and we shouldn't be adopting them. We really try to match it to our business drivers. Let's not just force it because, some book says we should. Well, if we don't have the business need for that, we don't necessarily want to go down that path, right? So, here are examples of some of the disciplines that we can talk about. Not even all of them, just most of the common ones. Things like, incident and problem change, knowledge, etc. But then we get down to things like, release management. Release management is a really interesting one, and I can consider a little bit of the canary in the coal mine with what level of maturity that we are when it comes to ITIL. So, for example, change is very common. We talk to most of our customers about change management, but when we dig into the details, there's some weird quirks inside of it. Like, for example, change. That's what I'm going to change. Hey, I need to apply a firmware update to this router. That's the change I'm going to make. But things like the rollout strategy, the rollback plan, the communication plan, things like that, that's actually a component of release management. And change management is a difficult thing to tackle to begin with. It's a lot of paperwork for, what most of our users think that it is. Well, adding release management on top of it is just paperwork on top of paperwork. So we take release management very often out of the ecosystem, and we adapt change management to include those interesting elements, like the communication plan, et cetera. So you get the benefits of release management without having to, overburden your staff with doing things like, additional things on top of change management. And then, in kind of related to change management is our CMDB. We do some interesting things with the CMDB, configuration management database, where all of our CIs or configuration items go. It's used for change management, but you know what? There's a lot of similar elements when we start talking about asset management. Asset management is all about, what is the entire life cycle of our device? Well, according to the book, if you read the book, the ITIL guide, it says things like a device should not be in the CMDB, meaning it should not be a CI, if it's not actively providing a service. Well, think about a laptop that's unplugged sitting on the shelf that's in stock. Yes, it's not providing a service. Arguably, it should not be in the CMDB, but it should be in our asset database because I still need to keep track of that. I don't want to lose that. And so coming up with an attitude of saying, well, we're going to have a single database, and then we're just simply going to have a couple of different perspectives into it. If I'm looking at it from an asset perspective, what are things that I care about? I care about things like, the warranty and, the department that it's assigned to and things like that. If I care about it from a change management perspective, I care about, the lockout window, and I care about, who the owner is and, various things like that, CI related parameters. But it's the same database, so we don't have to have, actually two different systems that we're going to try and synchronize or something like that associated with it. So asset management, not going to be, a huge driver for ITSM related conversations, but like we said, since they're so similar in some of the technology that we're going to do, we feel that bringing them into the same platform gives us a lot of value. And you don't have to bring that into the equation. A lot of customers say, hey, I've got to start with ITSM, focus on that, and then bring in ITAM later, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. But they really kind of play together nicely. How do we populate the CMDB? Well, that's a big part of things like inventory and discovery. We've got to go gather all of that information to be put into the system. So they play together very nicely. So it doesn't matter how many of these you're trying to implement. A lot of our customers will sit down and say, oh, you're not ready for problem management, or oh, project management or portfolio management isn't really ready yet. We can shrink it or expand it to whatever parameters you think you need for your organization, and we adapt the tool to kind of match that more closely. Okay, so we've talked about some of the kind of fundamentals and some of the ideas. Let's jump over and get into a little bit more details on what the actual platform and so forth looks like. So here I am. I'm going to show you a little bit more about Neurons for ITSM. So remember, Neurons for ITSM is Ivanti's ITSM platform, pretty obviously. It is all web-based, and most of our customers choose to deploy it in the cloud. You can do it on-premise, but there's a lot of big advantages by doing it up in the cloud. As we scroll through here, you can see it's very easy to understand more about what, all my incidents I'm looking at. I've got a little lightning bolt on the left-hand side that shows my major incidents. I can see my SLAs pretty easily right there. I can do a quick search over here on the side if, I need to look up all the tickets from Aaron Green and see what that user is submitting. Or even up here in the top, oh, whoops, don't put a slash in there, put a backspace, that's what I wanted. If you want to open up these saved searches, I can very easily jump around. Oh, show me all incidents. Show me all active incidents. Show me all incidents not closed. Show me, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different goodies here in terms of representing that data and more easily showing it. And then I can also create those saved searches by just kind of open up the filter list here and say, hey, show me open, logged, and active incidents that are a priority 1, 2, and 3, that are on my team that are open this month, or, whatever I want. As soon as I like that search, I can go and save it over here on the side and say this is, Hadzik fancy search, or, whatever I want. And then it's easy to pull that information up there at the top. A lot of our customers open emails, tickets via email, which is a totally normal process, but you can also open them by hand. If I could just, click new right there. This is our incident form. Incident is almost always deployed with our customers, and so it's obviously a big topic of conversation. We've got lots of kind of tweaks we make to even the Ivanti out of the box based on what we usually believe is good for customers. However, every organization is different. So a lot of what I show just hopefully gets the juices flowing, get you thinking about the possibilities. Eventually, we would sit down with you as part of a workshop configuration and walk through, okay, what exactly should these shows? Which fields are going to show up? Which ones are going to be mandatory? Things like that. But I can go and like search through my directory structure. For example, here, Active Directory, I pulled that information in. We're getting to the point where we have a lot of internal communication software like Teams or products like that. So having a button here to call with Teams or chat with Teams is incredibly convenient. I don't want to have to pick up and go to a separate tool and go find that user in that list and then scroll down and then start a chat. Well, geez, I can just click that button right there and bam, it's going to open up and start that chat or that call session. If I type in the error message down here, the summary, VPN error number 413 is an example. We have the ability to do what's called a related item search over here on the side. I find that things like knowledge management, being able to create a nice, robust knowledge base, it doesn't do any good if our users or our technicians are not looking at it. What good is knowledge if no one looks at it? So there's a lot of times we're going to try and spoon feed information to our users and our analysts. And in this example, we automatically search through the knowledge base or the problem database or incident or whatever objects I want to search for, and presented that data to the analyst as they were filling out the ticket. How many times you heard that statement? Well, it took me longer to fill out the ticket than actually to solve the problem. We're trying to combat that behavior with making their lives a little bit easier. If you're only saving 5 seconds, you know what? When I open 25 tickets a day, that kind of information does add up. If I have like a resolution to it, I can even hit this button to link and resolve that very easily. It's going to send the resolution out to the user. I could go down here and pick the category. Oh, this is probably, a network service, and the category is an error message, something like that. Impact and urgency, those things are going to set what our severity is. Up here at the top, you can see it's a priority 1 now. I definitely have a problem with this particular machine, or this particular issue. Whoops, I forgot to put a description in there. I've got to start figuring out what's going on. Why am I having this problem? That's a big problem for me. Notice that I've got to declare major incident right here. So a button to say, well, geez, yeah, I've got lots of people having this problem. I want to make this a major incident. What's happening here is we're unlocking kind of a parent-child relationship. Now I've got this button that says add affected user. When I go in here and add a user, what's happening is on the back end, we are taking the contents of this particular incident and we're cloning it, making their own incident, and then relating those items to the major incident. So a lot of things were happening right there when I hit that one button. And so here I can see those individual incidents, and I can, do something with them if I want to. A lot of times what we end up doing is, when we have a parent, we close the parent, it's going to close the child with the same resolution, but we can set up however you want, but that's a very common methodology for it. When we save this, actually I already saved, if we hit refresh over here, we can see that our SLA clocks have kicked off. We've got full SLA management, in terms of understanding what the priorities, the severity, how's that going to set my first, second, third escalation, all that kind of stuff, and set off notifications if we're breaching SLAs or reporting SLAs, things like that. All right, so if I want to go and actually do some more root cause analysis on this, I could open up a problem, and say, okay, here I've got this problem. I'm getting this VPN error message, and right now I have a workaround, maybe reboot your computer 5 times. That's an atrocious workaround, but you know what? It's all I've got at this point. And as I go and work that problem, I'm going to come up with a resolution. Oh, well, the resolution is I need to upgrade the firmware on my VPN appliances. I don't get paid to spell well, just FYI. That's what's terribly spelled. So let's go ahead and save that as a problem. So a big part of ITSM and ITIL specifically is the linking of our different components. So I've linked the major incident to the child incidents. I now linked it over to the problem. I can open up the problem and start doing that root cause analysis. Just a quick kind of sidebar on that. If you're not doing problem management today in your existing ITSM tool, it's something I really encourage you to dig into. Here are things that are hard. Change management's hard. CMDB's hard. Self-service is hard. Problem's actually relatively easy because it's all within our control and it's not too difficult to implement. So I would consider it if you haven't got into problem management yet. So here I can understand the root cause. It's the root cause is it's some firmware issue, and that's why I have to go and upgrade the firmware. So now I have the problem. I've done my root cause analysis. Oh, I got to pick an owner who's going to be our owner for this. I always get stuck with these problems. It's Dave always assigning them to me. I should probably sign it back to him next time. So now I can go through and say, okay, well, tell me more about what I would do to fix this, right? I would probably get into change management. So you can see I can link right from problem management or technically right from incident or wherever. It doesn't matter how I arrive at this destination. I can go and create that we're going to be, doing a firmware upgrade on our VPN appliances, right? That's going to be what this particular change is. Again, here's that release management that we talked about earlier, that it may not be applicable to everyone, but if you want to, you can have it connect over to release. Full, CAB membership if we want to have CAB voting and all of that kind of logic. Depending on your size, that may or may not be too bureaucratic or too much paperwork, but again, that's something we can scale into. Change management is our most changed module. Kind of funny how it works out that way, right? Change is the most changed. And that's okay. It is okay to adapt change management. Don't let that book tell you you have to do it this way or you're doing it wrong. I would rather have you do change documentation. Some customers start out with just that. They go from nothing to, well, geez, let's at least write down that I changed something yesterday. Hey, I'll take that over nothing. And then we slowly, surely merge or mature along that pipeline to where we're doing full-on change and CAB and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be an emergency change. Whatever the values I would put here in this particular change form, I would just go fill out based on what exactly we're going to be changing. So again, notice how it's linked. I'm going to go to it. I'm going to kind of look at it in a vacuum, not necessarily just in the context of where we came from problem management. And notice you have these tabs up here at the top. This gives us the ability to jump back and forth between records really quickly. Again, even though it's only saving 3 or 4 seconds, I don't have to re-render the entire page. I can just jump back and forth and show that data a lot more quickly. So we've got a risk calculator here. I like it because it lets us take the subjectivity out of risk. Am I going to affect users? Is it during the day? All of those different things. Hey, look, it set my risk level to high based on the questions. I didn't have to set it specifically to a level. The tool did that for me just based on some questions. There's this planning section here. Again, this is what we stole, and we said, I like these elements of release, but I don't want full-on release, so we went and parked them here right inside of the change. And then since I've linked over to the service, that followed us actually all the way from the incident, because we linked, if we go up here to the top, we can see we picked the network service. That followed us to the problem. That followed us now to the change. And now I can understand better about things like what is going to be the lockout window for this. I can't make this change at a certain time. There is a lockout happening, or here's the standard change window coming up this particular weekend. Let's go to our service here and let's link a slightly more exciting service. Our network service is a little bit on the boring side, but being able to understand how those components connect to each other is a big part of change management. Like, let's actually go to that service. I open up my enterprise service right here. And this gives me the ability to understand, okay, like, what are the hours of operation? What is the change lockout? What is the change schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And then I can also look at like the actual connections between the different devices. Why on earth do we do change management? We're trying to prevent those oops moments. Oops, I didn't know your SQL server also ran another application. I thought it just ran my application. So when I rebooted it, I impacted you and I didn't know that. Well, now I can understand the impact analysis. I can go back and say, okay, what were to happen if I was to stop this database? What is going to affect the upstream components and so forth? So this is definitely on the mature side. When you're looking at that maturity curve, we're talking about Goldilocks here. If I'm only in that little bed, this is probably not, I'm not ready for this. But eventually I can grow into it. When I'm Papa Bear and I am the most mature, I am the largest, being able to understand more about impact analysis there is important. So I did a quick run through of showing what an incident would look like, turning that over to a problem, turning that into a change, opening up the CMDB and looking at the services that we're offering, and then understanding the impact analysis associated with that. So that was kind of a quick run through of what it would look like from an end user's perspective. All right, we got a couple questions. I'm going to pause for them. Does the ability to contact users directly from a ticket using Teams come out of the box, or is it an extra enhancement NCSI created? Good question. So this button right here doesn't technically communicate with the user. That button opens up the Teams application. So it's not as fancy as you think. It's simply opening up the Teams application. It's not sending them a message. I still have to type in that message. So no, this is not out of the box. We added this. However, this is a trivial thing to set up. This is not incredibly difficult. As a matter of fact, you know what you should do? We have a YouTube page. Let me go to that really quick. ncsi.us/videos is a nice, easy shortcut to get to it there. But we create little snippets, little how-tos and so forth that are, well, how do I do this one function? Here's using quick action variables in Ivanti Neurons for ITSM that Thomas Adrianson, one of our engineers, went and put out. I don't think we have one on that Teams integration, but that's a good point. I'll have one of the guys go make that to say, how do I go and add this button into it? Because it is something we've created, but it's not incredibly difficult to do. All right, we've got another question here. How do we populate the CMDB linkages that you showed? Okay, so that's a little bit of a more complicated answer. The short answer is we can find devices. That's pretty straightforward. Part of our discovery platform, is able to say, hey, I found a server, I found a workstation, I found a printer. Okay, now what? Simply sucking those into the CMDB is pretty straightforward, and we can do that. However, to understand that this SQL server, in our example right here, I've got this SQL server right there, it depends on, or rather, a server depends on the SQL server. That linkage, this little line right there, we either need to, number one, do that by hand. If your rule of thumb, not perfect, but kind of take this with a grain of salt, 500 servers. If you got 500 servers-ish or less, you probably want to go and do that by hand. And it's pretty straightforward. You click on the database or you click on the CI or whatever it is. We've got a relationship tab here. You simply say, hey, I want it to relate to it. So I'm going to do an upstream or downstream link, and I go and connect it. If you have greater than 500 servers, that's probably going to become too tedious. Or if you have an incredibly dynamic environment that's changing and switching all the time, I wouldn't want to make someone have to do that all by hand. So we do have a tool. It's an add-on. So it's called Ivanti Neurons Discovery with Service Mapping. And the service mapping is the little connection between the two devices. So again, greater than 500 servers, let's definitely talk about that and how we could populate that automatically. And then we've got a cool option that when you're making a change, you can actually have a button here that essentially says rescan our map here. So maybe someone did a vMotion or made some change this morning and it hasn't been updated in the CMDB. We can have that be updated relatively quickly. Okay, get another question here. You showed a remote control tool. Is that one that Ivanti uses, or can we use third parties? Okay, so you can see I've got a remote control button right here. This is really just a conversation starter to say we can understand more about other tools as well. For example, I've got some options up here to integrate with other products, like we integrate with Jira and Azure DevOps pretty regularly, or other third-party tools. And remote control is one that is a very common conversation starter because, hey, I'm probably going to remote control as part of this ticket, right? So we have a remote control tool. It's part of our Neurons workspace. You can go and purchase that and we can integrate it. But you know what? If you've got a third-party remote control tool, as long as we have some kind of identifier, like for example here, it's convenient to link the customer's assets. Here's all the assets that user has assigned to them. So here's a device. If you have some kind of indicator, the name, the IP address, I don't know, and it's some indicator that we could pass over to your remote control tool, we've been able to integrate other third-party remote controls to the tool as well. So you've got an option, you've got flexible options there. Okay, all good questions. Keep them coming. I want to flip over and talk a little bit more about asset management for a second. Because like I said, I know we're talking about ITSM, but asset is always a very close second when we talk to our customers about what they're trying to achieve. And so we need to look at them like not necessarily at the exact same time. They are two different disciplines and they have different priorities and so forth, but we want to kind of look at them in the same big picture of what I want to see everyone kind of grow into. So there's an interesting theory you need to talk about when it comes to asset management. So a little bit of background on me. I came from a systems management. Ivanti product called Endpoint Manager. I was a deployment engineer for, more than a decade on that. And so my brain told me this is what asset management was like. It said something like this. Okay, this is the life cycle of an asset. This is when I plug it in. This is when I unplug it. That is the entire life cycle of an asset, right? But if you take a step back and you think about it for a minute, that's absolutely not true. Think about all the things that happen long before you plug it in, and plug in Wi-Fi, whatever. You get the idea. Once I physically grab it and I'm handing it to a user. So think about all of the elements that happen long before that ever happens. First of all, we have to have a standards catalog. I hope we're not buying whatever random garbage is on sale this week and we've got 37 makes and models to support. That makes our life harder. No, we have standards. Here's our 3 laptops and our 3 desktops that our organization sells or gives to their users. Next, you need to understand things like stock. Actually, before that, we need to understand someone wanting something. So there needs to be a request. A new user needs a laptop needs to be replaced. At one point, someone needs to say, I need something. So that's a request. Then we need to understand stock. Why am I buying more stuff if I've got stuff sitting over there? But stock's a hard thing to keep track of. It's powered off. It doesn't necessarily have an agent on it that reports into a database. Where is it at? So we've got to deal with that. Next, we need to understand things like, the purchase. How did I buy it? How do I actually go and transact that business to go buy more and keep track of what I have purchased? We got things like, it needs to ship. We need to receive it. We need to configure it. All of these things happen long before we actually go and hand it to the user. So after it's configured, we go and assign it. Okay, now it's assigned to our user, right? And they're actually going to use it in their life cycle. But sometimes it goes through a little bit of a circle here of, well, we assign it, but we might need to take it back into stock. Oh, the user quit or got reassigned or whatever, and we took the equipment back. We need to go back into stock. We need to reconfigure it to go out to the next user. So it might go through a little bit of its life cycle right there. But then at the end of its life cycle, again, the whole pile of stuff that happens over here. I need to understand what the warranty is. Do I know more about should I replace it? Or, what are my laptops coming up for expiration next month? or next year? What if I need to understand more financials like depreciation? I want to know what its value is, what department is it assigned to, who's the financial owner. I need to have information around how I destroy it. Do I have a certificate of destruction that shows that we shredded the hard drive, and can I prove that? Funny thing about things like that around compliance, doesn't matter if you destroyed the hard drive. It matters that you have proof that you destroyed it. So how do I keep track of all of that? So all these are things that are happening kind of at the end of the life cycle. But what a lot of customers get confused on is, well, no, I need a tool that finds my stuff. I need discovery. Well, what we do with that is we actually integrate that into the life cycle as a touch point. Asset management is just bonkers when you really think about it. Look at other technologies. I've got a problem. I don't want people from China and Russia to log into my servers. So I go and I buy a firewall, I plug it in, I turn on the rule that says block China and Russia, and I walk away and, pat myself on the back on a job well done. What about asset management? I take a laptop, I hand it to Bob, I assign it to Bob, and 2 weeks later, Jim is logging into it. Wait a minute. I hand a laptop to that user, and that user quits, and their manager hoards that laptop and says, well, geez, last time IT took 3 weeks to get a laptop, so I'm going to hoard this laptop so I can give it to my next new hire. There's a lot of problems we have in asset management that are not technology related. And so what we need to do is have a feed of data to keep the theoretical values with what the actual values are coming in. So what we do is we bring that into our Neurons Discovery platform, and we have all these different connector things, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but things like, Active Directory and Endpoint Manager and Intune and MDM or Neurons for MDM platform, and maybe use, VMware for your servers or Rapid7 for your vulnerability lifecycle stuff. The problem is all of these have data, none of them are good enough. Not a single one has, a single source of truth. Look at Active Directory, it's atrocious. It doesn't even know what make and model or serial number. Can't even tell you what operating system it is. It's bad. And things like Endpoint Manager or Intune, they're pretty good, but they're going to miss out on, printers, routers, switches, or iPhones. Or, there's a lot of things that might miss. So we're going to bring all of these different data sources from multiple different locations, and we're going to park it into a data lake. So our data lake's going to do a couple of important things, like deduplicate and normalize. So I've got you a tip. You want a tip for a CMDB project to fail? Here you go. It's free. Matter of fact, I'm paying you. You're here for lunch. Number one, assign it to one user and say, Jim, you're in charge of the CMDB. It'll never work. CMDB has to be everyone's project. Everyone has to update it. We've all got to be invested in CMDB for it to be functional. Number two, have someone log in that you just told it's important and they don't want to, have their same server show up 4 times. Server with a 1 with a parentheses next to it. Server with a parentheses next to it. They're going to hate that. So deduplicating the data down. So even though we found a server in Active Directory, Endpoint Manager, VMware, and Rapid7, we only show a single instance for it. And then also normalizing it. Dell Inc., Dell Computer Corporation, that doesn't help anyone out. Let's shrink all that down to Dell. Then we bring it up into our CMDB. So now I can compare what it should be with what it actually is. That's a big core component of asset management, is making sure it's what it's supposed to be. We don't do that with that firewall example earlier. You don't wake up one day and the firewall rule got turned off, by a user, maybe another administrator, but our users can affect our asset management systems. And so feeding that data in, then understanding the difference between it is a big part of that. So that was kind of a quick theoretical run through on how asset management should be working. And you can kind of see a little bit of those elements if we go in here back to the tool, switch our role over to an asset administrator, we can see those kinds of components. So we can understand more about our standards catalog. That is, again, what the standard things that my company is going to go and purchase. So we open up the product catalog right here. They can be desktops and laptops and 11,000 kVA silent diesel generators, whatever I want. Here's my example, my Dell Latitude E5440 that my fake company purchases. You can see things like how much do we pay for it. You can have an internal price as an external price. Maybe you do chargeback or show back. You can see what your useful life is. Oh, the CFO just hit me up and said we need to get 5 years out of our laptops. That's how long we're going to depreciate them. So now I can keep track of that. So now that perennial question, what devices do I need to replace next year? Pretty straightforward, because I understand their useful life. I understand when they went into service. Now it's just some quick math to calculate that. I can see how many of these assets that I have, how many I have in stock. You know, again, stock management is a difficult discipline because it is offline. So how do we keep track of that? Well, we open up and take a look at our Colorado Springs stock room here, for example. You can see I've got 4 laptops that are ready to be went and assigned out to our users. Grab one, go assign it to our users. Or we can track consumables. Consumables is something that, you know, you only keep track of the quantity, not the serial number. So we've got serialized assets and then consumable assets. You can argue where that line is drawn, like a monitor is a big thought exercise of is it a consumable or is it an asset? But we can help out in whichever way you want to go with that. And then every single time we have a transaction, we check in something, we check out something, you know, we're going to show up in our inventory transactions here. So one of my favorites is to look at it from the perspective of an employee. I heard a really interesting anecdote from a customer one time, and they said, we had this high-level executive, and the executive quit, not on particularly good terms. And so standard practice, what happened? We came back and said, hey, Mr. Executive, I want all your stuff back. And the executive was smart. They said, sure, absolutely. Give me a list of what you want back and I'll send it back. And I kind of scrambled and said, oh, crap. Well, let's find some tickets. Does anyone have a spreadsheet? Or, you know, it's just a mess. Well, the proper way to do that would be actually to assign the actual assets to that user. So now it can be part of an offboarding workflow. And this is why I keep saying that ITSM and ITAM are so connected that it's good to look at them together, not in completely separate vacuums. I've assigned these 3 assets to this user. As part of an offboarding, this user is leaving the organization. I could very easily have it say, send them an email. Oh, thank you so much for your time working for our company. You were absolutely amazing. It was a real pleasure. Oh, by the way, we assigned you this laptop with this serial number. It was a Latitude IFE440. It has this part number, this serial number. You were assigned on June the 14th of 2019. We would like it back. That kind of consistency, you better believe those users are going to be panicking. Oh, crap, they are paying attention. I got to get this stuff back. So even just showing the receipts gets people motivated to solve some of these problems, like bringing our equipment back as part of that, especially in today's day and age of remote. We've got a cool service we've hooked up with a couple of customers that is this laptop ship box thing, where as part of an offboarding workflow, it automatically sends the user a laptop box, or even larger than that, for them to put it in, and all the tracking's taken care of, and all the shipping's there. So there's some cool examples of things we've done with customers like that. So assigning it to the actual user is a very useful tactic. So now I can go back and take a look at that asset and understand more about, okay, what is its depreciated value? What, you know, who is it assigned to? What is its relationship? Oh, it's in the APAC Sydney, Australia office. What's its useful life compared to its asset age? Oh, this one's actually coming out of life here in the next month. I've got to go worry about it, but it's still got 60 months left on its warranty, or 60 months total on its warranty. Maybe we should go change the useful life on that. So this is where I can understand more about, you know, did I pay for it? Was it a purchase order? What's the fixed asset GL? Usually when people are asking about asset management, I ask them a question that's my canary in the coal mine, and it's this kind of stuff. Do you care about the purchase order? Do you care about how much you paid for it? If the answer is no, you probably don't need full asset management. You just need to have a CMDB that has some aspects of inventory and discovery. If the answer is yes, I need to know the purchase order number, then asset management is probably what you want. And purchase orders is interesting because if we jump back over here, let's pose a quick little thought exercise. We said we need to go and request something, and if it's not in stock, we need to have it purchase it. Thought exercise time. What if you bought 100 laptops and only 50 arrived? How would you know that? Other than tribal knowledge, oh, I would just know that. What's the process that would make you know that? Well, this is how we would know that. We would actually create the asset at time of purchase. So when the PO is cut is the time we create the instance in the system. You can't lose track of it then. The vendor hasn't even made it. It's still in a factory somewhere. It hasn't even left the factory, yet we have a record for it already. So what that looks like is over here you can see we have our purchase order section right here. I can open up a purchase order, and then when I'm looking at the individual line items, I've got a checkbox right here that says create the asset. So when I check that box, it is going to create those assets as part of that process instead of waiting for it actually to arrive. So now I've got them in there as stub records. If they are never show up, I would potentially know that. So I got logged out of my other tool, and now I'm picking crosswalks. Hopefully I'm not a robot. Cross your fingers. Okay, good, I'm not. That's a little bit more about asset management, but I want to show you real quick a little bit of our Neurons DEX. This is maybe not as tied to the hip as ITSM and ITAM is. This is sitting next to it, but it's still really important. And it's usually the third conversation we have. We talked about how that could be, like that remote control tool is built into this. The discovery of our assets, like actually seeing them where they are in the world. I could even keep scrolling down here and get to the street level if I really wanted to. Get real-time information on devices. When I click on this, it's actually pulling this information down across the internet. You don't need any VPN or any kind of backhaul for this. It's just all 100% internet-based. But we have those connectors. So those connectors are the way to talk to other tools. How do I have a big picture of all of my equipment if I can't gather it from different data sources? This Neurons that I showed you with that map, absolutely fantastic for workstations and not for phones. iOS and Android, it's terrible at. So we ought to look at something like Intune or Neurons for MDM. Let's go connect over to that product to pull that information in. A great example of that is VMware down here in the bottom. I've got a problem. I need to get all of my VMs into my CMDB. How do I do that? What's the path for that? Well, do I want to install an agent? Well, have you ever met a server admin? You're never going to sit down to a server admin and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we add more agents to our servers? That's lame. So here I can connect to VMware. I'm just going to say the connector is VMware. This is this thing called a connector server. VMware is a fundamentally on-premise technology, so I actually use a specialized version of our agent to tunnel through to get to your VMware equipment. I would put in the server name right here, ignore cert warnings if I don't have a legit cert on it, put in administrator at vsphere.local, put in what the password's going to be. Oh yeah, you're right, non-running VMs, who cares about those? I don't need them, let's skip those. And then I would like to pull that in once a day at 5 a.m. There, who timed me? Dave, did you have your stopwatch out? 2 minutes, 30 seconds? I mean, that was quick. The hardest part, to tell you the truth, is getting a username and password. You just got to pry that out of them. Fun fact, ask for a read-only username and password. We don't need admin rights to do something. We just need admin rights to read stuff, right? So that's it. I'm now pulling in all my VMware information to my CMDB. Or, let's go connect to Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Intune, Rapid7, Qualys. Why would I talk to Tenable or Rapid7? Well, those are great because they scan the whole network. They're going to catch things maybe that other tools are going to miss, and then we can answer those questions. How many times have you heard this said? I've heard it at hundreds of customers before. Why does Active Directory say 4,000, yet our management tool like SCCM says 3,000? What's the difference? Well, we've got a reconciliation engine. We can ask that very question right here. What did we find from Active Directory that was not discovered from Endpoint Manager? Oh, it was this 133 devices. Now if I click on this, it'll take me to that page. No, I don't know the password. And there we go. There's the devices that are missing from my Endpoint Management tool. So you can see that these all kind of relate together to help us populate our database, our CMDB database, but also our asset database. I don't have time to get through it today, but I'll check our YouTube page for another video on our bots. That's our healing architecture, being able to proactively solve problems, try and make it so that our users actually don't call in with an issue. We clean up their disk space or we fix their problems, beforehand. So, okay, that was a quick run through of the ITSM, ITAM, a little bit of our Neurons DEX platform. Again, that was just meant to get you a little bit interested in it. We have recorded videos that are much longer ones on our YouTube channel. And if you like what you saw, I'm always happy to sit down and do a one-on-one. That's usually the best because I need to understand what your needs are. Every company is going to be different, so matching your exact business drivers to the tool is a helpful part to understand better about how it would potentially work.
You okay? You take a breath? That was a lot.
Hey, Dave. I get paid for the number of words that I say during these kind of presentations, so I got to get them out there. I'm trying to buy a boat. Yeah, and how loud, and how many words there are is how my conversation is.
Because you're not getting the free lunch, so that's important.
Yeah, where's my food? Everyone else is eating, and I'm up here, waving my hands in the air. I'm hungry.
You were talking very quickly and covered a lot of ground there while I was in the chat and having a great time over here. I may have missed it if you covered it. Did you talk about maybe some of the individual modules for those that are looking? facilities, HR, going a little
Yeah,
bit
no,
broader
we didn't
within
go
the
over that. ITSM is very interesting because it's IT service management, right? But if you take a step back, we have the concept of enterprise service management. That, what is a broken toilet if not a facilities incident? At HR, I want to enroll in 401k. Isn't that an HR request? So once you feel good with ITSM, we like to expand it to other business units. We like to talk about, how we could bring HR, facilities. Those are very common ones. Excuse me. GRC is a net new one that we have that's really great for governance, risk, and compliance, making sure that we match our controls there, as well as things like security event management and so on and so forth. So it can be a broader picture. And I really like that because I think from an attitude perspective, we're the department of no. I'm sorry, ask your average user. They're not going to say, wow, I love IT, they're amazing. They usually have a love, sometimes hate relationship with IT, right? Because we tell them, no, you can't do that. We know the security reasons why. We know the regulatory reasons why, but they don't care. They don't get it, right? All they know is, hey, I can install this app on my home machine. Why can't I install it here? So I think it's a little bit of an olive branch as well to reach out to those other departments to say, we're not the department of no. We want to help you out. We want to help drive the business forward. Wouldn't it be great to have a single portal that everyone goes to, and I can get a broken toilet, I can enroll in 401k, and I can get my printer fixed all in one spot. Obviously, you don't have to start with that. Again, when we're talking about maturity, that's towards the end of the maturity curve. But I think it's a great part of the picture to do that enterprise service management as well.
Yeah, and so you kind of led me to my next question. And you did a great job. You covered the software, and I think it's very apparent how powerful the tool is.
Right.
But the success or failure often depends on how it's implemented, and that's something that NCSI really specializes in. I mean,
Yep.
I would tell you, I'm part of the sales team. We're incredibly spoiled here. I think our sales to engineer ratio is about one salesperson for every 5 engineers. It's really amazing, and we're unique in that way. Want to speak to the services just a little bit and the importance?
Yeah, you hit it right in the nail right on the head, Dave. A tool is just a tool. I don't care what it is. If you buy it and it's implemented poorly, you're not going to have a good experience. So our focus is, let's take that tool. It's a great starting place, but we've got to find out exactly why we're here today and how we map it to your exact needs. And so we go through usually an implementation phase. We sit down with the customer and go through a workshop. Okay, what fields are mandatory? We're going to bring our data. How do we have this flow work? What can we do for that? We flesh all those details out. And then we actually go and implement it in the tool for the customer. We love to teach a man to fish, right? Here, let us help you set up a couple. We'll show you how to create 2 or 3 request offerings. Then you can go create your own afterwards, so that you feel like you got that on-the-job training. We go through things like UAT. I got to tell you, we do hundreds and hundreds of projects per year. I can't remember how many we do have at any given time and how many go-lives we have per week. I can tell you the number one way to have a successful implementation, again, I don't care what product it is, UAT testing. UAT testing is absolutely paramount. The more you test at that phase, it's often overlooked. We really try and push it and emphasize, please commit to this point. You're going to have a more successful implementation. And then a lot of our customers like to have a little bit of ongoing support. We've got a managed service division that they're like, hey, you know what? The platform's great. For most organizations, we don't need a full FTE. Some competitors out there, they're like, oh yeah, go hire a developer, go hire 4 developers. That's not with the Ivanti Neurons for ITSM platform. You're going to have a fraction of an FTE usually is who manages the tool. And, being able to maybe keep tabs on it over time. I want to mature it over time. I don't want to go hire a full-time person. So, hey, 10 hours a month. 20 hours a month, something like that. Yep. For one of our engineers that's on managed services, we pay attention to make sure they don't get overloaded and so forth, so they're dedicated to just a certain set of users. And then they log in and make those kind of add moves and changes as part of it. So implementation services, managed services, all of these things are options we have at our disposal from a deployment perspective.
Sure. And at the risk of beating the Goldilocks theme to death here, I think you got the message. If we've got customers that want to start off in that small bed, if that's the right size,
yep.
and then move on, and we've got those services to support you all along the way. But there's one thing that we haven't touched on yet. A lot of our customers already own a tool,
yep.
and are going to want to migrate from their current solution.
Yep.
What are some tips and tricks around that, best practices?
Yeah, we've got lots of different experience with that. Rarely do we find someone that doesn't have anything, and we're starting with scratch. So we've got some great tools that help us migrate data. That was a big faux pas about 5 years ago. The industry as a whole kind of came out and said, don't migrate your data. It's not worth it. There's too much mechanical problems associated with that. But that was when we were mostly coming from on-premise tools to cloud. Now we're usually going cloud to cloud. And when I stop paying my old bill, they're going to erase all my data. I can't just keep it there as an archive. So, bringing the data over, we have a specialized tool that lets us come from, pretty much any major service provider to any major service provider, kind of doesn't matter, and translate that data as part of the process. So that's a big part of what we do. But also just understanding, the mechanics of what we're trying to accomplish in that big picture. We have a lot of customers that are in larger platforms. They use more expensive tools that are, industry leading and everyone loves them. But they've got 5 developers on staff, and it costs them a lot. And the renewals are only increasing in price. We recently did not recently, it's been a couple of years now, but we had a large cosmetics company that was on one of these large expensive platforms, and the renewal just kept coming in millions and millions of dollars per year, plus all of the staff. We were actually able to migrate them over, and even with, and theirs was a large implementation, we had like 125 service requests that were ready to go live and a whole bunch of stuff like that. We were able to migrate them over with the implementation cost. It was still cheaper than their previous year's renewal. So now they're into the just, savings like crazy because they're not paying for ongoing implementation like that. And their license renewal is so
and
much
it's
cheaper.
more than just the cost savings there. We've received feedback from them. They've been using it now for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
I think they're actually happier with the Ivanti product because it can do, in some instances, it can do more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're on a kind of bigger, bloated, it was a great idea. And if you're writing a bunch of custom apps, that's kind of my judgment. If I've got 1 million custom apps on my platform, well, maybe we're not the best case for it. But if you're not that, a lot of customers bought into those bigger platforms saying, one day we're going to get to that. They implement ITSM, and then they kind of pitter out and get distracted and move on to other things. Now they're left with this huge renewal, very expensive people that manage the tool, and you got to have a bunch of them. So if that's your use case, our product is very, very good fit to replace that for, quite a bit less cost.
All right. So I think we're about done, ready to wrap it up. Hopefully
Yep.
everybody enjoyed their food. Do want to say thank you for coming. We did have 2 winners on the city.
Ooh, exciting. What city is it?
We awarded 2. Well, you're going to make me say it. I'm going to say it wrong. Mobile, Alabama.
Mobile, Alabama.
pronounced it
Never been
correctly.
there,
I apologize
but
if I said that wrong, but I think I've got that right.
Very pretty.
Yes, we did have kind of co-winners came in about the same time, so we're going to award both. Again, wish I could tell you what it was, but Larry didn't give us that information ahead of time, so we're going to blame Larry, but we will follow up. We're also going to follow up with the recording, link to the recording for this.
Yep.
Some additional information. I know Larry put the YouTube link to our videos in the chat. We're going to have that in the follow-up email as well. There may also be a 2 or 3 question survey. I would ask you just to take 2 minutes to fill out that survey. We're fine. If you want to come here and just learn a little bit more and have lunch and not have further follow-up from us, that's okay. Maybe we'll catch you down the road on the next one. But to avoid us pestering you with phone calls and emails to get that information, if you just want to let us know through the survey, and certainly if you want some follow-up, we'd love to talk to you, do this demo one-on-one, as Bryan said, and answer any further questions you have.
Okay. Again, thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you see the videos on YouTube. Great source for how we do different things. We keep those up to date. If you got any questions, suggestions, or questions about that, you can also hit us up and we can make more topics. Like, for example, the question about the Teams one. That was a good one. I think we ought to make that into a video. So just subscribe and watch out for updates.
Okay. Thank you, Bryan, and thank you everybody for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. We did get a question right there.